sit down there. No, you're not allowed the buttons. You're not allowed to have the buttons. No, not with the buttons. Give a quick hairbrush here. I know people aren't supposed to do this, but what the hell? I can tell I'm in the north. Static electricity. Whew. Yes. I'm sure.
Is that his Diet Coke? Afternoon, brethren. I hope you had an enjoyable lunch, and thank you for coming back. I know there's some people back there straggling to come back, but I want to go ahead and start with our third speaker for today. I would like to introduce Lady Sandra Tabitha Cesaro, who was born in rural Wisconsin. Her areas of interest include drawing, painting, poetry, theater, dance, and printmaking. A lifelong fascination with the creative arts has served to inspire her work in the magical world. After graduating from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee with a bachelor's degree in fine arts in 1982, Tabitha worked as an entertainer, typesetter, editor, commercial artist, and computer graphics illustrator. In 2009, she obtained an associate in science degree in paralegal studies. Tabitha is a member of several Martinist and Rosicrucian organizations. She met her husband and co-author, Charles Cesaro, in the early 1980s, and the Golden Dawn system of magic has been her primary spiritual focus ever since. Tabitha spent 5 years working on the paintings for the Golden Dawn Magical Tarot, which she began at the encouragement of Israel Regardi. Please help me in welcoming Tabitha Cesaro.
Thank you, Yasser. Thank you, everybody. I love microphones because I don't speak very loudly, so Today I'm going to talk about images of initiation, the Hermetic Tarot, and it's going to be an exploration of a variety of pre-Golden Dawn and post-Golden Dawn. Maybe I shouldn't stand so close. Post-Golden Dawn tarot images. The tarot, or Book T, as it is sometimes called, is a pictorial book of ageless esoteric wisdom. For centuries, it's been used by magicians, occultists, and mystics for the purposes of divination and meditation. Like the Kabbalah, the tarot is a complete, elaborate system for describing the hidden forces behind the manifest universe. Not only is it a key to all occult science, but also a map for uncovering the various parts of the human psyche. Some have called the cards of the tarot the hieroglyphs of the Western mystery tradition. The exact origins of the tarot are unclear. It's been claimed by some that the tarot has existed from the time of the Egyptians and even earlier. Its knowledge dating back as far as Atlantis. Another theory states that the great esoteric minds that witnessed the burning of the library at Alexandria met in secret and decided to save the wisdom of the ages from being lost by hiding it in a game of cards. Still others say that the tarot came from the Far East or from the Gypsies. As romantic as all of these stories are, they remain to this day unencumbered by facts. The tarot does not predate the ordinary deck of playing cards, which were introduced into Europe soon after 1375 CE. The forerunners of the European playing cards were probably created in Persia or India and brought into Europe around 1370. One early ancestor, known as Mamluk playing cards, featured a deck of either 52 or 56 elegant designs containing 4 suits: swords, polo sticks, cups, and coins. Early Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese decks were based on the Mamluk model, although the suit of polo sticks was soon changed to batons or clubs. The 22 trump cards of the major arcana appear to be a later creation, as well as a purely European one. The earliest surviving tarot images, or trumps rather, still in existence date from about 1450. During the first part of the 15th century, the tarot was used almost exclusively at European courts of nobility, for it had become a pastime reserved for the aristocracy. However, there's little evidence to suggest that it was used for fortune-telling or any occult purpose at that time. It was considered simply a game. And the earliest decks were hand-painted. With the invention of woodblock printing in the 15th century, tarot cards became more common. In 1781, interest in the tarot gained momentum when Court de Gebelin, a Freemason and Protestant minister, claimed that the tarot trump cards were taken from a secret Egyptian book called the Book of Thoth. Gebelin's influential Le Monde Primitif, or the Primitive World, was the source of many of the fanciful histories concerning the origins of the tarot. In 1860, Eliphas Levi produced his magnum opus of magical theory called The Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. Levi was certainly aware of the tarot theories of Gebelin and others. Levi's own view that the tarot was an ancient esoteric book of spiritual knowledge was undoubtedly confirmed in his mind when he drew a remarkable comparison between the 22 trumps of the tarot and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The occult revival of the 19th century promoted serious study of the tarot and its Kabbalistic associations. Occultists and magicians began to view the tarot as a quintessential tool for meditation and esoteric studies. In a small booklet published in 1888 called The Tarot, Its Occult Significance, Use in Fortune-Telling and Method of Play, a rather long title, S.L. McGregor Mathers insisted that the word tarot, or rota, was an anagram which pointed to its occult meaning. Torah, or the Hebrew word for law, Troa, Hebrew for gate, rota, which was Latin for wheel, and orat, which was Latin for something that speaks. Taur, the Egyptian goddess of darkness, and Ator, the Egyptian Venus. This implied that the tarot is a gate hidden in the darkness for those who are unable to tap into its riches. It is a gate of initiation, just as Venus or Hathor is the gate or door of initiation. The tarot is a book that speaks, and what it describes is divine law and the eternal wheel of universal cycles that power the manifest universe. The tarot deck used by the Golden Dawn was based upon the research by S.L. McGregor Mathers and William Wynne Westcott's work. Westcott and Mathers built their system of correspondences from earlier observations of Eliphas Levi, although they did not use Levi's particular attributions of the Hebrew letters to the cards. The tarot cards used by the Stella Matutina were slightly modified from those of the original Golden Dawn, especially with regard to the court cards. According to some sources, Dr. Wynne Westcott, who helped design the original Golden Dawn tarot, also assisted Dr. Felkin in some of the changes made later in the Stella Matutina deck, almost 2 decades after the original was drawn up. The 22 paths and their corresponding trump cards are active and moving. They are subjective currents of energy or channels that run between the Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, connecting the spheres. These are the cards that tell the story of the human soul in its eternal quest for wisdom. They represent the variety of experiences that spiritual seekers undergo as they travel the pathways on the Tree of Life, going from encountering the differences that occur between one Sephira and the next. They also represent the energies of the planets, the zodiacal signs, and the elements of the ancients. The tarot trumps are considered true initiatory forces, having both an esoteric or spiritual meaning as well as an exoteric or mundane meaning, which is used in divination. Contained within the tarot is a complete mythological world, a realm of symbol, allegory, and metaphor. The figures of the major arcana can be compared to different archetypes that we assume in different steps along our spiritual journey. At different times, we assume the role of the high priestess, the magician, and the fool. At times, we are the Greek hero Perseus, who comes to rescue the maiden Andromeda. And sometimes we are Andromeda, chained to the rock of mortality. Sometimes we are the small demons chained to the altar of the devil card by our own delusions and misconceptions. At other times, we may be the devil of the 15th key, causing the delusions for others around us. And at all times, we are the goddess of the 21st key, surrounded by the powers of the universe. Therefore, the tarot cards are snapshots of our own subconscious mind at various stages in our evolutionary growth. They are a filing cabinet of powerful archetypes. They are allegorical figures without a specific mythology, and thus they are universal to all mythologies. The story that unfolds in the major arcana is the story of the hero, universal to all cultures, and uncovered in the wonderful books by Joseph Campbell. The quest of the hero is to go off and perform noble acts, which in the end transform the hero into something greater. Often the hero leaves the comfort of familiar surroundings in search of adventure, and often at the prompting of the gods. There are trials and tribulations along the way, and the hero is tested time and time again. Finally, the hero prevails and is far stronger and wiser for all that he or she has endured. And this is the story of everyone who follows the spiritual calling in life. It is the story of the tarot, and the tarot is our story. As magicians, we work to become more than human. That's not to say we want to be superhuman. It means that we're striving to become the best possible human beings that we can be, to fulfill our fullest potential. To do this, we want to awaken those psychic gifts that we believe everyone is born with, but which are asleep in most people. We work to establish communication links between the conscious and subconscious parts of the human psyche. And we consider the tarot cards to be astral mirrors of our own mind. These cards can also be used to explore and connect with the many archetypes that are less familiar or less developed within a person's psyche. One of the principal purposes of the tarot is a card for meditation. Tarot images help focus the initiate's mind on the ideas that they represent. They are also used as scrying symbols, as doorways into other realms of reality. They are images of initiation. In a moment, I'm going to show you a series of images, tarot cards that were designed by members of the Golden Dawn, such as Wynne Westcott, and as well as one of the predecessors of the order, Frederick Holland. And finally, I'll show you a series of tarot images designed by A.E. Waite for his followers. I'm grateful for R.A. Gilbert and others for allowing me to show slides of some of this material for this lecture. What I hope to show is that there are many ways that the tarot has been interpreted by mystics and magicians of the Hermetic tradition. If the tarot is anything, it is a pictorial expression of spiritual growth. And as we shall see, even artists who created their own tarot decks will sometimes change their mind about tarot correspondences. If the tarot cards are indeed images of initiation, and the journey of initiation is a personal journey of self-exploration, then it stands to reason that each artist's interpretive view of a tarot deck that they have created is a personal expression of that journey. Meditating on these images can lead the initiate to personal insights as well as to universal truths. I'd like to talk briefly about an individual who had an important early influence on the development of the Golden Dawn, and this was Frederick Holland, who was a very learned and competent occultist. Holland had been initiated into the SRIA the same day as MacGregor Mathers, who was his neighbor. He would have known Wynne Westcott through the SRIA and through Masonic channels. In 1883, Holland founded his own order called the Society of Eight. Members of the Society of Eight included Kenneth Mckenzie, author of the Royal Masonic Cyclopedia. Mckenzie has been described as a tireless promoter of Rosicrucianism and the only English occultist to have conversed at length with Eliphas Levi. Mckenzie was one of the first in England to concern himself with the occult significance of tarot cards. Other members of the Society of Eight included John Yarker, Francis Irwin, and of course Wynne Westcott. And as Chick was saying earlier, it now seems most probable that the cipher manuscripts which form the basis of the Golden Dawn's initiation rituals were originally written down by Kenneth Mckenzie as ritual outlines for Holland's group, the Society of Eight. Leading Golden Dawn historian R.A. Gilbert suspects that the real Hermanubis Temple No. 2, listed in the official history lecture of the Golden Dawn, written by Westcott, was in reality Holland's Society of Eight. Little is known about Holland's group, since it either did not get fully off the ground or simply faded away. What is known about the society is this: it was not Masonic and was sharply distinguished from the SRIA. Its known members were all experienced occultists, and it's very likely that the society was intended to be open to women. Kenneth Mckenzie wrote the following to Francis Irwin in August of 1883, and he says, "I'm glad to welcome you as a brother of the Society of Eight. This society means work and not play. It is by no means poor little foolish Rosicrucian society. We are practical and not visionary, and we are not degree mongers. That nonsense is played out." It's evident that the society was practical and not theoretical. It dealt with alchemy, Hermeticism, and the tarot. And since Frederick Holland's Society of Eight was probably the prototype for the foundation of the Golden Dawn, the tarot deck designed by Frederick Holland can be considered the prototype of the Golden Dawn's tarot. Holland created a set of tarot cards for his own use, and the astrological information and other attributions did not conform to those of the later Golden Dawn teachings. Instead, Holland used the tarot attributions of the French Kabbalists such as Paul Christian, Eliphas Levi, and Pappus, whose work he would have been very familiar with. So let's look at some of his cards. As you can see, they're very simple in design. Holland's deck has 22 trump cards, 40 small cards, and no court cards. Here we see on the left Aleph. The number 1 is the Hebrew letter Aleph. In the French Kabbalistic system, this card is attached to the juggler or the magician. Here we find no such written title on this particular card. Instead, Holland's cards focus on the Hebrew letter attributions. Very few of his cards list the actual tarot trumps. Here the card of Aleph is associated with the phrase God or man. Above and below the letter Aleph are written ideas which further define this idea. Above it states the first principle, the producer of existence, and below it says unity, the mother of numbers. Straightforward, uncomplicated, no frills tarot cards. And these explanations are taken right from Eliphas Levi's book, The Dogma and Ritual of High Magic. And next to it we have the card of Beth, card number 2. This card is slightly more complicated than the previous one. We are accustomed to assigning the planet Mercury to Beth and the tarot card of the Magician. But using the French system, Holland attributes this letter to the moon and the High Priestess. The symbol of Luna is shown in the center of the letter. Information about the letter Beth surrounds the letter on all sides. And I'm not going to get into too much of that because I just want to show you just how unique and interesting these cards are. Here we have on the left the card of Keth. Again, I'm not going to show you very many images because they're very simple in design and you get the general idea. Here we see card number 8, the card of Heth, the fence. Now what's going on here? For such a simple design, this card has everything in it but the kitchen sink. For the first time, we see a traditional name of a tarot trump written in one of Holland's cards, Justice, right under the symbol of the scales. Interestingly, one aspect of this card, as Holland gives it, is the Antichrist, worshiper of the images or images and not its creator. Maybe this is why Holland used the Hebrew letters and not the traditional images associated with the tarot. And right next to it, we have the card of Lamed, assigned to the sign of Libra. Finally, we have a correspondence here that I can recognize. Again, it worked its way into the Golden Dawn system. In the French system, this is the card of the Hanged Man. And again, a very simple design surrounded with a few ideas relevant to the Hebrew letter. Here we have Samek on the left, attributed to Sagittarius, and the concept of moral power. On the left, Holland has attributed this card to the tarot trump of the devil. And here, if you look at the various sides of the card, there's a kind of an opposition being shown on the two parallel sides of the cards. The moral power of Sagittarius is countered by the devil and black magic on opposite sides. Next to it, we have the card of Ayin, attributed to Capricornus, as well as the temple rebuilt and Jerusalem. On the bottom, it says accoutrements and Tower of Babel. This is the card that we would normally recognize as the tower, or sometimes the lightning-struck tower. The card of Resh on the left is attributed to the judgment. Notice the serpent. Because snakes shed their skin, the creature was thought to have the power to renew or resurrect itself. On the bottom, we have the words universal medicine and resurrection. And on the right, we have the card of Tau, which Holland has attributed here to the sun. This is the card of the universe, or the world. On the left, we have truth. To the right, it says the microcosm. And I like how Holland has added the word Kether in the center of Tau in Hebrew to show the beginning and the end coming together. And here he has the 4 cherubic elements in the corners, just like the traditional tarot card of the world or the universe. And a few of the pip cards. I just want to show you some of Holland's pip cards because I find them very interesting. Here we see Holland's Ace of Wands on the left, showing the letter Yod, the Hebrew letter Yod, in the center. The simple design of the minor arcana cards is very reminiscent of the Golden Dawn's truncated pyramids of the Enochian tablets. Could these cards and their design be an early source of the design of the truncated pyramids of the Golden Dawn? Maybe, perhaps. At the top of the card is the name of one of the angels from the Shem HaMephoresh, and at the bottom is another Shem HaMephoresh angel that are associated with this card. Hebrew names associated with the first Sephir of Kether appear on the left, as they do on all the aces, all the number 1 cards associated with Kether. Next to it, we have the Ace of Pentacles on the right. Here we see the Hebrew letter He with a dot in the center to indicate that it is the final letter He of the name Yod He Vav He, and is attributed to Earth and the suit of Pentacles. Top and bottom, we have again the names of 2 Shem HaMephoresh angels and more information on Kether. 2 of Swords on the left. Here we see 2-letter Vavs representing the 2 of Swords. Top and bottom, again, are the names of angels. And the names on the sides are names and words attributed to the Sephira Chokmah, which is the second Sephira on the Tree of Life. Next to it, on the right, we have the 3 of Wands. And here we see 3 Yods. Angel names again, top and bottom. And the Hebrew names attributed to the 3rd Sephira of Bina are along the sides. In this vein, keeping the template going, here on the left we see the 4 of Swords. Holland shows us four-letter Vavs, angel names above and below, along with Hebrew names associated with the fourth Sephirah of Hesed. On the right, we have the Five of Cups. 5 Hebrew letter Hays are what's used to represent the cups here. Angel names above and below, along with Hebrew names associated with the fifth Sephirah of Geborah. And I'm just going to go through a few more very, very briefly so you can see that they are following the same formula. On the left, 6 of Wands. On the right, 7 of Cups. On the left, 8 of Wands. In the middle, 9 of Swords. And on the right, 10 of Pentacles. Incidentally, I suspect that Holland's manner of drawing these pip cards, as they're sometimes called, the numbered cards of the tarot, using a background filled with tiny Hebrew letters of the name Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, using the individual letters to visually indicate a particular element or tarot suit, had a big influence on Wynne Westcott's painting of alternative versions of the Enochian tablets that were displayed at the 1997 Golden Dawn Conference in London. Westcott used these exact same artistic devices on the various squares of the elemental tablets, some of which you can see here. The Hebrew letter Yod, you see on a fire to indicate the element of fire, and the letters He and Vav are there to indicate the letters of earth, water, and air. Speaking of Dr. William Wynne Westcott, I'd like to show you a series of early cards drawn by him. This deck was apparently pre-Golden Dawn, and the cards were based on the traditional French designs again. They were evidently Westcott's personal tarot cards, and there is no reference to them anywhere that I know of. They may have a basis in the tarot cards given to Westcott by the publisher R.H. Fryer, who was the first in England to import cards from France. I also think that Westcott had much more to do with the designing of the Golden Dawn's tarot cards and teachings on the tarot than has generally been acknowledged. On the right, we have the card of the Magician. Among the interesting features of this card, it seems pretty obvious that the central figure of the Magician is Christ, holding the caduceus of Hermes. You'll also notice that the elemental tools are positioned on the 4 corners of the altar and not at the 4 sides of the altar. Like Holland's cards before him, all the cards of this particular deck follow the French Kabbalistic attributions. Here the Magician is attributed to the Hebrew letter Aleph. And what I find fascinating is that, like Holland, Westcott has written a 4-fold interpretation of the card along the 4 sides of the card. The interpretive meanings here are very similar to those provided by Holland. Here, however, Westcott provides a more elaborate interpretation. In Holland's Magician card of Aleph, the top side simply said, God or man. There were other phrases above and below, and the central figure of Aleph concerning the first principle and unity. At the top of the Magician card, Westcott has written here, in the divine world, God. At the bottom, it says, in the celestial world, the first principle. On the right, it says, the intellectual world, unity. And on the left, the terrestrial world, man. Now, many of you will recognize these terms as descriptions of the 4 Kabbalistic worlds and their attributions to the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, and the 4 elements. In addition to this 4-fold explanation of the card, it appears to me at least that the design of Westcott's cards, like Holland's, suggests the beginning of a truncated pyramid, a figure which would later become very important again to the Golden Dawn's Enochian system of magic. Here's Westcott's high priestess on the left. In accordance with the French attributions, Westcott equates this card with the letter Beth. Author Paul Christensen describes the high priestess as a woman crowned with a tiara, surmounted by a crescent moon, covered by a veil whose folds fall over her face. She wears on her breast the solar cross and carries on her knees an open book, which she half closes with her cloak. Here we see a lady who looks very much like a 19th century image of Queen Victoria. And on the right, we have the Empress. In this card, the crowned and seated Empress has a scepter surmounted by a globe. An eagle, representing the Holy Spirit, sits on her right shoulder. And it says, at the sides, it says, in the divine world, the Holy Spirit. In the celestial world, Venus. It's interesting to note that Westcott has scribbled notes right above the figure. You see the word tongue, and underneath that, criminality and merit. It's as if he's working out ideas on the very cards as he's drawing them. Here we have the emperor on the left. He is reclining against a throne holding a scepter crowned with a lotus flower. Following the French attributions, Westcott has assigned the letter Daleth and Jupiter here. It's a pretty straightforward representation of the emperor. However, he looks like a proper 19th century gentleman to me. It must be the mustache. Around the card it says, in the divine world, Jehovah. In the celestial world, Jupiter. In the intellectual world, the quaternary. And in the terrestrial world, the Messiah. Next to it, on the right, we have the Hierophant, assigned to the letter Aries, assigned to the letter He and the sign of Aries. It shows a crowned ruler bearing a triple cross wand seated between two pillars, while two priests kneel before him. One of the most noticeable things in this card is the addition of the Masonic pillars, surmounted by the two globes. And another thing that strikes me about these cards is that Westcott was a decent artist in his own right. He wasn't a great artist, but he was certainly a better draftsman than a lot of people give him credit for. These tarot images show quite a bit of careful detailing. The notes in the margins and in the center of some of the cards show the evolution of his thoughts concerning these tarot images and correspondences. Westcott really did play much more of a role in developing the tarot teachings of the Golden Dawn than he gets credit for. Here we have the card of the Lovers on the left. It's a very interesting card. Here, Westcott follows the description given by Eliphas Levi of a man seated between vice and virtue. Above him shines the sun of truth, and in this sun is love, or Cupid, bending his bow and threatening vice with the shaft of his arrow. The role of vice appears to be filled by Lilith here. And on the right, we have the chariot. It's a pretty straightforward copy of Eliphas Levi's drawing of the chariot, pulled by two sphinxes. Standing in the chariot between four pillars is a victorious warrior, crowned with three pentagrams, the crescent moon on both shoulders, the terrestrial world, and the union of the positive and the negative. On the left, we have Justice. Unlike many of the French designs, Westcott's figure of Justice is standing and not seated, and is blindfolded. Following the description of Paul Christian, in one hand she holds her sword down rather than up, and in the other she holds the scales of balance. And on the right we have the card of the Hermit. Following the description of Eliphas Levi, this card shows a sage leaning on his staff and holding a lamp in front of him. The face of the hermit is almost completely hidden from view, and a series of arches is seen behind him. On the left we have the wheel, again a pretty straightforward rendition of Eliphas Levi's drawing of the card from the book The Key of the Mysteries, showing a wheel supported on a caduceus wand and a crescent. Hermanubis is on one side, Typhon is on the other, and above them is a sphinx holding a sword. On the right we have strength or fortitude. The card here shows, it departs slightly from the traditional French designs. The card shows a seated woman closing the jaws of a lion. Now, Westcott's put a lot of effort into drawing this lion, and one interesting aspect of the card is the halo over the woman's head rather than the figure 8 shown in most of the French decks. Considering that Westcott had pictured Christ as the magician, perhaps this woman is meant to portray the Virgin Mary. I wish he'd left more notes. Here on the left we have the Hanged Man. We see a man with his hands tied behind his back, hanging upside down from a wooden beam. One innovation of this card is that Westcott has chosen to show the hanged man from the backside rather than the front. And while the French Kabbalists describe the two trees on either side of the hanged man as having 6 branches, Westcott has chosen to depict these trees showing 6 roots, which are very prominent. Tied to the man's arms are 2 bags of gold. And next to it we have Westcott's death card, attributed here to the letter Mem. It's pretty straightforward imagery, a skeleton armed with a scythe, mowing the grass upon which are body parts, And around the border it says, "In the divine world birth, death is the gate of life. Fear not and enter herein, for in thy death are sown the seeds of immortality." The card of temperance. This card closely follows Eliphas Levi's depiction of an angel who holds a goblet in each hand. She pours from one to the other, and the two essences, whose union form the elixir of life. On her forehead is the symbol of the sun, and on her breast are the symbols of a square and a triangle, referring to the septenary. Next to it, we have the figure of the tower, which shows a Babylonian ziggurat or stepped pyramid being destroyed by a lightning blast. Unlike other descriptions of this card from other decks, no figures are seen here falling from the tower, and I really like this card. I think it's very well done. The card of the star on the left. The kneeling woman pours water from two vases that form a river at her feet. A large star is above her head with smaller stars beneath. Although we're used to seeing an ibis or bird of Hermes in a tree next to the figure, Paul Christian describes a butterfly besides the woman, alighting on a rose, as is shown here. There are notes scribbled above the figure which read, "Truth, nature, and wisdom unveiled, purity, fire, and water from air, and the star of Venus." Next to it we have the card of the moon, with two towers and two dogs shown below. The design of the card is curiously off-center to the left, and the crayfish, which is very prominent in some cards, seems almost forgotten on the right. The card of the sun. The image here is straight out of Levy. The sun shining down on two children who stand holding each other's hands. But instead of a wall behind the children, here it surrounds them. Westcott has scribbled something out here and written notes on LVX, Paracelsus, and page number reference to another book. Next to that, we have the card of judgment, with an angel blowing a trumpet and the dead rising from their tombs. And we have the last two cards of his deck. We have the world. Oh, incidentally, there was no devil card. For some reason, I don't know if it was lost. I did not have, it was the only card of the trumps that Westcott did, which I haven't seen. I don't know if it was lost or what happened to it. I'm sure he had one, but I don't know where it is. Anyway, we have here the universe, or the world. Here we see a nude woman within a garland of leaves. Levy describes this image as the crown of Kether, surrounded by the four forms of the Sphinx, or cherubim, with the figure of truth in the center. Westcott seems to have crossed out the letter Ta and inserted the letter Shin. And next to it we have the card of the Fool. And this guy is a real mess from looking at him. Not only is a dog biting him, he's got one shoe on and the other shoe on a stick. He's got hay seeds sticking out of his hat, and he looks like he's been drinking. In any event, the sides of the cards tell us, in the divine world, the science of the prophets, the priesthood of magic. In the celestial world, the third mother, Shin, astral light. In the intellectual world, 21. And in the terrestrial world, the sensual, the flesh. Interestingly, Westcott has crossed out the letter Shin and changed it to Ta. He wasn't sure which it should be. So he went back and forth with it. So that's Westcott's personal tarot, drawn by his own hand before the Golden Dawn was founded. The next couple of slides are also from Westcott's work, but these are from a time after Mathers and Westcott developed the Golden Dawn system of tarot correspondences. And I'm going to take a short break to get some water. Okay. Now, these cards are not nearly as detailed as his personal deck because they were in a notebook, and they were basically to kind of slapdash just get down the bare basics of the symbology that he wanted in the cards. Here we've got the Tower and the Moon. These are from Westcott's Golden Dawn ritual notebooks. The tower now has the Tree of Life and the Qliphothic tree on either side of it. The Dukes of Edom are falling from the building after the crown of the tower has been sheared off by the lightning bolt of Mars. The moon is now centered, and the path leading from the swimming crayfish between the two dogs and off into the horizon. 4 yods representing the 4 worlds are falling from Luna. This is the card of the sun, and it's really obvious here that Westcott did not put half as much time into drawing these cards. Again, it was a ritual notebook, slapdash, get the information down, as he did with his earlier deck. They're much more very quick sketches drawn just to show the basic symbolism. Death card and the Devil card, showing again the traditional Golden Dawn symbology. Temperance. Here we have two forms of the card required in the Golden Dawn ritual. The so-called earlier version, with the lion and eagle changed to the angel, is on the right, and the so-called newer version, which is actually the more traditional image of temperance, is on the left. These next few slides show a comparison between some of the court cards of the early Golden Dawn and the later Stella Matutina, which was an offshoot branch of the Golden Dawn. The cards on the left are from the early Golden Dawn notebooks from Westcott's collection, first published by Darcy Kuntz in 1996. It's been speculated that Moyna Mathers drew these cards, and the style is similar to other of her works. However, it's also been suggested that Westcott might have drawn them. We have already seen that he was a competent draftsman in his own right, and he certainly would have been up to the task. So on the left we have the original Golden Dawn version, and on the right the later Stella Matutina version, which seems stiffer and less detailed by comparison. One of the main differences between the two versions is in the original Golden Dawn card shows a symbol of the circle within a circle circumvented by a cross. This is a symbol of the sigil of fire in the King's scale. And this is shown because the King of Wands represents fire in this King's scale of color, or the highest divine world of Atziluth. It's described in a paper on color that was first published in a paper from Florence Farr's notebook, also first published in 1996. And the Stella Matutina version on the right, this sigil doesn't exist at all. There's simply a circle placed on the fiery wand held by the king. Here we've got the comparison of the Queen of Swords from both decks. There's simply no comparison between the relative artistry of the earlier Golden Dawn version on the left and the somewhat more bland cartoonishness of the Stella Matutina version on the right. Details certainly appear to have been left off of the later version. The original shows the winged head of a child on the crown of the figure. It seems to have been dropped from the later version. The original also shows the sigil of air in the Queen scale for the air suit and the water court card. 3 concentric circles on the crown of the Queen. And the Stella Matutina version just doesn't have any of this symbolism. The Prince of Cups, same thing. On the Golden Dawn version, the prince has the figure of an eagle on his crown, his breast, and knee. On the Stella Matutina version, these images are so tiny that they look like squiggles. The Golden Dawn version shows the sigil of water in the prince scale on the cup for the water suit in the air court card. And again, the Stella Matutina version doesn't have this. The Princess, or Knave of Pentacles. For our final comparison of the court cards, we see that the Golden Dawn Princess has the figure of a winged ram's head on her crown, midriff, and knees. I can't figure out what the hell is on the crown of the Stella Matutina Princess. I really don't know what that is. And of course the GD version shows the sigil of earth in the princess scale, since the Princess of Pentacles is earth in the material world of Asiya. So far we've looked at a series of tarot images by one of the founders of the Golden Dawn, as well as an early important influence on the Golden Dawn. It's fair to say that the tarot images of the Golden Dawn have had an important and far-reaching and long-lasting effect on how modern esotericists have come to view and interpret these images. Now I'd like to turn to a series of post-Golden Dawn tarot images commissioned by a figure of authority in the Golden Dawn tradition, a mystic who left the Golden Dawn and went on to found his own order. I'm speaking, of course, of Arthur Edward Waite, who joined the Golden Dawn in 1891. When the GD split apart in 1903, Waite became the head of a splinter group known as the Independent and Rectified Rite of the Golden Dawn. In 1915, he formed the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, commonly known as the FRC. Waite's collaboration with artist Pamela Coleman Smith published in 1910 as the Rider-Waite Tarot, is without a doubt the single most popular tarot deck in the world. Waite produced that deck for the general public, but I'm not here to talk about that particular deck. You've seen it billions of times. It's in billions of movies. Because I want to talk about a different deck. This is Waite's personal esoteric tarot deck. It wasn't his personal deck. It was designed for his group, the FRC. There is no minor arcana or numbered cards because the pip cards didn't really matter that much to Waite. He did not consider them at all important. There are two versions of this deck, one in black and white and the other in color. Waite referred to this deck as the great symbols of the paths. And these were not cards for divination, they were purely for meditation. On the left, we have the card of the Fool. There were actually two artists that were commissioned for doing this particular deck. The first artist was Wilfred Pippet. He actually only did two cards in black and white, and one was the Fool and the other was the Emperor. For some reason that we don't know why he was involved, because the other artist was John Brahms Trinick, who was an Australian artist, also a member of the FRC, and he did all of the other versions that are in this particular deck, both the color versions and the black and white versions, except for the two done by Pippet. On the left is the card of the Fool. It was drawn in 1923 by Wilfred Pippet, who is both unknown in the FRC and unknown as an artist. I believe he did illustrations for children's books and possibly religious books. This Fool is unlike all previous versions of the Foolish Man, but then so was the Golden Dawn's version of the card, which showed an innocent child at the very beginning of his potential. Speaking of his published deck and his book in the Pictorial Key to the Tarot, Waite says of the Fool, "He is the spirit in search of experience. Many symbols of the instituted mysteries are summarized in this card, which reverses under high warrants all the confusions that have preceded it. This is a glorified Fool in search of unity with the divine. And on the crown, it says the word unitas, or unity." And I also want to mention that I was granted permission to show cards from this deck, the great symbols of the paths, by Robert Gilbert and the FRC, as long as I didn't reveal too much of their use of them in ritual, which I definitely respect that. What I'm going to talk about instead is I'm going to show you the cards and talk rather about their artistry, point out some of their symbolism and some of my own inferences. And because they're simply gorgeous to look at and very interesting, I think that you'll be able to make your own conclusions and get your own meaningful experiences out of them. On the right here we have, of course, the artist who did all of the other cards. This is John Brahms Trinick, an Australian artist who was also a member of the FRC. Trinick was an accomplished illustrator in watercolor, and most of these are done, except for the black and white ones. The color ones are mostly done in watercolor. He also worked with pencil, pastel, and crayon, and a collection of his watercolor copies of European stained glass windows can be seen at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. Okay, let's go here. And here we have his black and white version of the Magician. The Magician is dressed in white robes. Instead of an infinity sign, he has the pentagram of spirit above his head. The design of the card is elegant and uplifting. And to the right, we have the color version, another version of this Magician card by Trinick, this time from the watercolor deck commissioned by Waite for his order. Some of the cards from the black and white deck and the color deck are both identical, while a few others, such as the Magician card, can be a little different. Trinick's color version shows much more of an Art Nouveau style with its sweeping curves and vines. The familiar infinity sign above the Magician's head is back, which makes me think it was painted before the black and white drawings. I think that the black and white drawings were done afterwards to kind of fill out the deck, because there weren't, not all the cards I believe were done in color. So some of them, and also they had to present the cards for their own members to have their own cards to study, so that was why the need for the black and white deck. Okay, and next we have the High Priestess. Waite considered this card to be one of the most important images in the deck. The High Priestess was to him the embodiment of the hidden mysteries of nature and science. It's a very beautiful and powerful card, but the color one on the right is even better. I'm so glad to have this wonderful large screen here because you really get a sense of it from the back, which I don't always get sometimes in these presentations, but this big screen is perfect for this. In the color version, the figure of the High Priestess is enfolded with a kind of veil shaped like an omega. The pillars can be faintly seen on either side of her with the Hebrew letters Yod and Beth. The Yod is a little bit damaged to her left to indicate that the pillars of Yakin and Boaz. The man at the bottom of the picture is the initiate, who aspires up the path of Gimel toward Kether. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck, and it truly shows the power and majesty of the divine feminine. The Empress. This card is that of the Empress and is typical of many of the cards of Waite's Initiatory Tarot deck. It's very simple, especially the one on the black and white one on the left. There's almost little or no symbolism other than the central figure of the card. She is, to my mind at least, the divine feminine as the Great Mother or Holy Mother. Simple, uncomplicated, all-loving, all-knowing. This Empress has no jewels, no scepters, none of the trappings of royalty. She has no need of these things. Her power and her royalty come from within. Before I go on to the next card, I just want to let you notice the pedestal that she's sitting on. There's no Hebrew letter indicated there. It's just a pedestal. And in the center, compare this to the previous card. Now this is a very different version of the Empress card, painted by Trinick. So he painted more than one. I think he was experimenting with them. A couple of these influences, particularly the Magician and the High Priestess, really show that Art Nouveau style, which doesn't really appear in any of the other color paintings for this deck. One could almost see Trinick designing this card for one of his stained glass windows. And like the colored Magician card, being Art Nouveau-like, it's a very lovely card, but it also lacks the power and the pure spiritual essence of the black and white version. Now the color version on the far right is a wonderful version. It's basically the same as the black and white one, but it's even with the color it is just richer. And if you look at the pedestal that she's sitting on, I think you can see it there, I'm not quite sure. There's the letter Hey. Waite's FRC followed the Hebrew attributions of the Golden Dawn, which state that the letter Hey is attributed to the Emperor and the sign of Aries. So why does this figure have the letter Hey? Maybe it's a reference to the letter He of Tetragrammaton, the letter associated with the divine feminine. In any event, it's certainly a very intriguing card. It doesn't need a lot of jewels or frills. It's very potent as it is. And here's the Emperor card. It's the only other card that was done by Wilfred Piffet. And this is like a masculine twin of the Empress card that we saw earlier. Like the Empress, he is dressed plainly. The Emperor has no need of regalia and the trappings of royalty and power. He is royalty and power. His right hand is raised in the gesture that Waite refers to as the well-known ecclesiastical sign, which is called that of esotericism, distinguished between the manifest and concealed part of the doctrine. As you can see, there's clearly a Christ-like quality to this figure. The Emperor is not a military leader, nor a tyrannical despot. He is a purely spiritual leader, ruling by virtue of his divine essence. And here's the Hierophant. The black and white version clearly shows a bishop or vicar seated in the apse of a church, beneath the stained glass window. I don't know if it's the darkening color of this card or the fact that the Hierophant is positioned away from the viewer, behind a shaded archway. But I find that this card has a certain quality of aloofness and a spatial distance that the Emperor and the Empress cards simply did not have. The figure blends too much in with the dark background, and he almost looks like he's a part of the stained glass window behind him. Now I find the color version on the right much more satisfying. Instead of a gray figure against a murky backdrop, the figure is now a point of light within a dark building. He's no longer closed in behind an archway. Now the arches on either side of him reach skyward. He's no longer part of the scenery, but a focal point for spiritual ascension. Everything around him leads upward. He seems more approachable, more human, and his demeanor is softer than before. In his book on the pictorial key of the tarot, Waite tells us that whereas the high priestess was the prevailing genius of the esoteric withdrawn power, the Hierophant is the power of the keys, exoteric orthodox doctrine. He symbolizes all things that are righteous and sacred on the manifest side. As such, he is the channel of grace belonging to the world of institution, as distinct from that of nature. And here's another card that we have three versions of, the Lovers. On the left, we have the black and white version. Here we see an archetypal couple, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, with the higher figure of an angel blessing their union. Now, we're used to seeing an angel in the card of the Lovers, but Waite uses angelic figures very often in his deck, as we shall soon discover. I particularly like the way the trees on either side of the card are growing together. They're becoming one tree almost in the center under the angel. And in the center is a color version of the card. This version is much more impressive because of the diaphanous quality of the angel. Here you can see the roots of the trees growing together in unison. Waite rejected the medieval interpretation of the Lover's card with its old title of Marriage, an imagery which depicted a man standing between two women representing vice and virtue, which again we saw back in the Westcott card. In his book on the tarot, Waite says that in a very high sense, the card is a mystery of the covenant and the Sabbath. The woman in the card, rather than being simply a conscious temptress, is instead working a secret law of providence, and only through her can man complete himself. Waite also tells us that the card is therefore, in its way, another intimation concerning the great mystery of womanhood. And finally, we have yet another color version on the far right. Here's a different version of the Lover's card, and unfortunately this card's been very damaged by water specks or specks of mold or something. This is a very subtle card which shows some faint, transparent artwork that is made even more difficult to see because of the damage. Here, two trees are colored red and white, which are colors of the red solar king and the white lunar queen in alchemical symbolism. A third tree now appears in the center, as if it had sprung from the union of the lovers. Above this is a series of angelic wings which rise upward like flames. And it's almost impossible to see here, but there is an angel at the top of the card and a circle which might indicate the spiritual son of Kether above the figure. It's right at the very top. You can just barely make out the points of the wings almost toward the top of the card. The Chariot on the left. One of those cards, it's a little hard to tell it's a chariot because there's no actual chariot. There's like a flying disc. Like the charioteer in other decks, the figure here is seen standing on a moving object. It strikes me that this might represent an interpretation of a Merkaba experience, wherein Hebrew mystics went on visionary journeys into the heavens and were transformed by the event. The figure represented here has no need for a physical chariot. He has become the vehicle of his own spiritual ascension. Unfortunately, the color version of this card seems to have been lost or simply was never painted in the first place. I'm not sure which. And next to it we have the card of Strength. And this is yet another example of Waite's initiatory tarot, the great symbols of the paths, wherein it's not readily apparent exactly which card this is supposed to represent. Since Waite tried to simplify these images, making their symbolism as pure and uncluttered as possible. It could almost be any card in the deck, but I know it is the Strength card, and it's very powerful. I wish there were color versions of these two particular cards. I think they both would have been stunning. This is the Hermit. Again, it's a card, it's easy to name. It's a card of spiritual attainment. And it's virtually the same black and white and the color. It's just that the black and white one is actually a little easier to see because the color one is so, the figure in the light is so transparent you can barely see him. In this card, the light from the star within the Hermit's lantern envelops the Hermit's entire head within a halo of light. And this Hermit's feet does not even touch the ground. He exists beyond our world and is not bound by the confines of time or space. Here we have the Wheel of Fortune, and I wouldn't even call this the Wheel of Fortune. I'd call it the Wheel of Spirit, because that's what it seems like to me. It gives us a sense of peace, of quiet reflection, divine presence, and divine protection. It's unfortunate that the color version of this wheel or this card has disappeared, or maybe was never painted, because I would have loved to have seen this one in color. I think it would have been, again, another stunning card. Some of the simpler cards would have been the way that Trinick was painting them. They were gorgeous, and his simpler cards, I think, were the more gorgeous. Here we have Justice, another very interesting card. She's set within the image of a tree and surrounded by 12 flames or flaming stars. Above her is the flaming sword of the cherubim, which according to the Kabbalah kept the Garden of Eden protected from the fall of Adam and against the Qliphothic influences. Two images lie under the tree. The left is a face inside a rose. The field generated by the face is one of unity, of tranquility, and of birth. The image on the right shows a man and woman pulling in opposite directions at the bottom of the cards, while the man is entangled by the woman's hair like the tentacles of an octopus. They're inside a circle formed from a chain. This image generates a feeling of entrapment, separation, and antagonism. The entire card is an image of the mystery of equilibrium and passage through judgment and trials. Again, the color version is even better. What I like about this card is its vibrant, fiery red contrasted against the somber blue-green in the background. The face in the rose is a little harder to make out below, but it's much easier to see the twining hair of the woman in the lower right-hand circle. And another three-card version here, the Hanged Man. Here we have the Path of Mem. And Waite considered this card also one of the most important cards in the deck. The first two cards are pretty similar, the black and white and the color. Here we see the figure of a man wearing a crown. He appears to be dead in the water, floating in a filbert cross over which is a rainbow. At the top of the card is Noah's Ark. Waite refers to this card as the drowned giant. There's a long explanation of this card by Waite in the Complete Golden Dawn System of Magic by Israel Regardie, otherwise called the Doorstop Edition. A couple of Waite's rituals for the FRC were published in that book, and you can read it at your leisure. Waite calls the Hanged Man an image of the mysteries of death and resurrection. And finally, at the right, there is another version of the Hanged Man, and one I find very interesting. Here the Hanged Man is suspended. He stands upon the sphere of Tefereth, while above his outstretched arms is a large dark circle, the sphere of Doth. This image reminds me of the Golden Dawn's diagram of the Garden of Eden before the fall, where Adam is extended from Tefereth and his arms reach out to Geburah and Gedula. The card of death, and I think this is probably the best death card ever designed. The corpse lies at the very bottom of the card, at the bottom of a very dark cave, which looks like the underworld. Above the body, a series of steps ascend toward the light. The soul of the deceased, encased within a brilliant pentagram of spirit, rises upward. And the color version, it's a little harder to make out the ethereal details of the soul, which you can see a little bit better in the black and white version. But the contrast between the blackness of death and the brilliance of the resurrected spirit makes this a truly stunning card. Temperance. From this point, the cards just seem to get better and better as far as I'm concerned. The top of the card, we see a great angel between two pillars upon which are written Hesed and Gevorah. She holds two vases from which water is flowing down through the clouds into Yesod, and finally forming a river in Malkuth below. The color version of the card, we can see that one stream of water is golden. The painted version offers us a transparent, ethereal version that draws us in. I particularly like the violet rolling clouds, which make the bottom of the card feel heavy. But the white stream of water cutting through the clouds lead our eyes upward. Everything in the card leads upward toward the brilliant heavens. According to Waite, it is temperance fantastically, because when the rule of it obtains in our consciousness, it tempers, combines, and harmonizes the psychic and material natures. Under that rule, we know in our rational part something of whence we came and whither we go. The card of the devil. Many tarot cards depict, when they show the devil, it's actually something that makes us laugh or giggle. It's usually some sort of comical creature, pitiful creature with horns, hoofs, and barbed tail, and usually a tongue sticking out at us. But not this devil. Here's a devil with real power. He's kind of like the flapper devil from the 1920s. He's so alluring and powerful that he might actually be considered scary. The color version is even better. On the right, it has more punch to it. Look at the way the candles coil around each other like serpents. Look at the smoke doing the same thing. And the expressions of the lower two figures. They are not chained to the altar. They are cowering, defeated. The 6 smoking flames ascending remind me of the flaming shards falling from the Kabbalistic breaking of the vessels, which resulted in the formation of the Qliphoth, or unbalanced forces. This image shows us the master of the material world, and the plight of those who are a slave to that world. Another good card, the Tower. Needs no explanation. It's immediately understood when you look at it, especially the color version. The tower looks precarious. You can almost feel this tower being blasted and cracked in half by the lightning blast. There's also a kind of Lord of the Rings quality about it. Waite explains that this tower is an image of the materialization of the spiritual world. It is the rending of a house of doctrine or a house of falsehood. It also indicates in the most comprehensive way the old truth that, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. The Star. A very lovely card with the symbolism we've come to expect, but it's not a particularly spectacular card. On the left, the color version is much better. Like many of the figures in this deck, the goddess does not touch the ground, but floats above it. Regarding the Star card, Waite says that the figure will appear as a type of truth unveiled, glorious in undying beauty, pouring on the waters of the soul some part and measure of her priceless possession. But she is in reality the great mother in the Kabbalistic Sephira Bina, which is supernal understanding, who communicates to the Sephira that are below the measure that they can receive her influx. The Moon. Now, the main thing I'd like you to notice about this card is the symbolism that we would expect to find immediately. The 2 dogs, the 2 towers, the crayfish. Here they're so tiny in the card that you hardly even notice them. What you mostly see about this card is the 2 faces. And I can't think of many times where I've seen the sun appear in the moon card. In Waite's public tarot, the Rider-Waite deck, the face of the moon looks downward at the dogs and the crayfish. Here, however, the lunar face pretty much ignores these lower creatures. Her face is completely toward that of the sun. To me, this is a reminder that our focus should be on the higher self of the sun and Tefereth, rather than on the lower animal nature of the Nefesh. And the sun. Here is Trinnick's black and white version of the sun, and next to it the color version. The yellow color which pervades this card gives it an aura that the black and white version, although you can see it better, it just doesn't have the same power. We see a robed figure invoking, praying, or simply aspiring to his higher self, symbolized by the sphere of the sun. The arms of the mystic reach upward. The arms of the higher self reach downward. Waite tells us that the symbol of the sun is consciousness in spirit. When the self-knowing spirit has dawned in the consciousness above the natural mind, that mind in its renewal leads forth the animal nature in a state of perfect conformity. Judgment. The lower figure appears to be rising towards the angel, and I think that the presence of the rainbow is another indicator that this is the card of judgment, because the Golden Dawn version of the card also has a rainbow. The color version of this card is a little bit damaged here. It's a lot harder to make out. The lower figure in this card seems to be much more of an apparition, or a disembodied soul rising upward to join the higher self. In both versions, the lower figure is crowned, I believe, to indicate that he has achieved self-mastery or enlightenment. According to Waite, the judgment is the card which registers the accomplishment of the great work of transformation in answer to the summons of the supernal, which summons is heard and answered from within. And finally, the last card, the universe or the world. Unlike many of the other cards in Waite's great symbols of the paths, the cards of the universe is virtually unchanged in design when compared with the same card of other decks, although the wreath that encircles the central figure has become a chain. Weight tells us it represents also the perfection and the end of the cosmos, the secret which is within it, the rapture of the universe when it understands itself in God. It is further the state of the soul in the consciousness of the divine vision, reflected from the self-knowing spirit. It has been called the crown of the Magi. And this brings us to the end of the deck. And in an article written for the Occult Review, Waite tells us how the reader should approach the tarot trumps for greater spiritual understanding. And he says, if they seek to place upon each individually the highest meaning that may be drawn upon them in a mood of reflection, then to combine the images, the messages, modifying their formation until the whole series moves together in harmony, the result may be something of a living value to themselves and therefore true for them. It should be understood that in conclusion, I've been dealing with pictured images, but also the way of the mystics ultimately leaves behind the figured representations of the mind. For it is behind the kaleidoscope of external things that the still light shines in, and from within the mind, that the state of pure being, which is the life and the soul in God. So in closing, I just have this. I've shown you a series again of images from the pre- and post-Golden Dawn. All these images were drawn or painted to express divine ideas and to share these truths with others who seek the way of return back to our divine essence beyond the gates of this world. But in the end, all images pass away. We humans need visual imagery because we are still chained to the body, an awareness that comes and goes. When we can grow beyond the need for images, and even sacred images such as these, we'll have achieved union with the divine. And even more shall we have achieved unity with the divine. And I thank you. I hope you've enjoyed that.
So, brethren, as you've heard, have seen from our speakers today, there are so many precursors and interchange in the occult and esoteric world, with especially around the concept of initiation, reintegration, and really the self-betterment overall. So we wanted through this academy, again, as we've done throughout history, to expose Freemasons to all these ideas that are out there in our effort to continue to look at what's in this world, look at the symbols around us and reflect upon them and use those tools that we elicit. I want to again thank Chick and Tabby and Pierce, who had to leave, for being with us. We're going to get to that in a second. It's been a very long day, so I want to be conscious also with everyone's time. We can take a few questions if there's any in the hall in here for those who are here today. We're not going to be able to take any questions from online, but are there any questions here? This is working. Does anyone have any questions?
Do we have any questions on the Golden Dawn in its relationship to Masonry? Come on, guys. Somebody's got to say something.
Let me see. Eric, is there anything on the Golden Dawn? Any questions on the Golden Dawn online? No? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The Enochian system is part of the Golden Dawn system. It only goes up to the portal. It doesn't go into the second order of the RRAC. It would be studied, but it would be a side. The Rosicrucian, the second order, has to do with the Rosicrucian vault. And it just doesn't belong. The Enochian tablets are the guardians of the gates, the guardians of the vault of the Adepti. They stand outside of the vault and guard it. So you would work it in the portal hall. You would work that symbolism and use it. But when you go into the vault, then you're in Yetzirah. You're in the second level of existence. And they don't belong there. I know some people try and have tried to use it and had some pretty bad results. It's just wasn't meant to be. Okay? Okay. Solomonic magic.
Solomonic magic, would that also go into anything like from the Goetia, the Lesser Key of Solomon, things like that?
As a sideline, we study everything, including the Solomonic magic. In a sense, the very, 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 very beginning of the Golden Dawn ritual in the Neophyte Hall, you have a cross and a triangle. There's the triangle of light and the cross, a red cross and a white triangle. And it's on the altar. Now, the red cross in reality represents the candidate. Okay? It's the cross, the human. And the triangle is the triangle of light. And as you go into the second order, not the second order, the second initiation, which is the Latur, the triangle, then the cross is put inside the triangle of light, which is a form of Solomonic magic. You are doing at that time, you are invoking the energies into the candidate. So that is basically a form of the Solomonic tradition. And of course, we have students that have gotten heavily into that. And I don't try to encourage it because so much of it has been made up. They made up these names. Now there are certain, if I had, maybe next time, I'll show you how to make what we call squares, magical squares. And that's where you actually do create energies, where you can put your name in there and you can make a talisman out of it and so forth. But they need to keep away from trying to do that self. You can't do that in the vault. And the vault, going into the second order, it's the red rose and the cross of gold. It's a Rosicrucian order, basically. So you're basically, it's on a different level. It has nothing to do with the Solomonic tradition. That's done separately.
Come on up, Debbie.
My wife has got an astral eraser out, and she's telling me, oh no. Well, I'm always ready to be corrected.
I think one of your questions was, is there Enochian in the second order? And I believe that was your first question. And there is Enochian that's done, when I talked about the truncated pyramids, one of the things we do is scry into those squares of the Enochian tablets, and other parts of the system are used in the higher grades.
But they are separate from the actual second order teachings.
Okay.
They're part of it,
yeah.
but in a separate box.
Yes. Everything in its own box.
And we have one more question, Ben.
Okay.
Oh, Matt.
Are there any more questions? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, it's weird talking to this microphone. I'm curious as to both of your opinions on the correlation and interrelationship between ceremonial and ritualistic magic and how they interplay with intentionality, subconscious processes, and quantum mechanics. I hope that's not too broad of a question, but they all seem very related, and I would imagine you guys are pretty experts on these topics, and I'd be curious to hear what your opinions on that would be.
It's a good thought. It is, because ceremonial magic, like I was in my talk at the very beginning, I talked about bringing, excuse me, having to do with the recreation of the spirituality within yourself. Anything that you can imagine, you could create. If you put your mind to it, you can create it. So if you apply that thinking, you can apply it to the mechanics. There's so many ways. If you think about what's going on today, they're processing, I believe, with the printers, different mechanical parts, and they're actually trying and experimenting at this particular moment how to make a hand or a part of our body. And it's very magical. But it begins in the mind, and it's you project those thoughts, and the thoughts become a reality, and the reality becomes a truth, and it actually happens, and it's happening. And we have, I mean, just think of what's going on. I mean, scientifically speaking, their leaps and bounds are going. They're creating anything and anything that possibly you could think of. And I think maybe that's answering your question, or I didn't.
You definitely did to some degree. I'm just curious how, I'm a bit of a nerd, I read a lot, and I know I've looked into books about subconscious processes, right? The power of your subconscious mind. And I was wondering how that relates to intentionality, ceremonial magic, and the idea that everything is connected through quantum mechanics.
Okay. One of the first things that we're taught and we teach, it's in the very, very, very beginning, in the neophyte grade. And we have a neophyte grade which is not even related to anything. It's the time of introducing the candidate to the order. And if they can make it through the neophyte, then they're really invited into the order, which begins in the second degree, the Zelator. Getting back to the point that you were trying to get at, anything that you can think of, you're taught to, the first thing you're taught is to focus on a point. a point out there in the universe, or a point here in front of you. To be able to focus on an object or a point, and you drop, and you're able to just get rid of all the noise. We're constantly being bombarded by just sitting here, the trucks outside are beeping and the sirens and whatever, or the rattling. But you should be able to teach yourself to be able to concentrate on one point, to focus on that one point. If you could focus on that one point without being disrupted, you can create anything. You will have the ability to sit back and put together anything that you so desire. Because our minds have the capacity of making and creating these objects. It's up to us, but you've got to be able to learn how to focus, and it's so hard to focus. But it can be done, and it takes years and years of practice. And our lessons and our studies are all programmed. You're always being programmed and taught how to control your emotions, how to control yourself, so that you could start to focus. And if you learn how to focus, you could create anything you want. That's the key. Just think about how many times in your life you have decided that you want to do something. And you sit back and you think about it, and you think about it, and you think about it, and you actually do it. And it happens. You have created a thought. And that thought is the point. The point where you have the ability to move it into reality. It's a reality that happens, and we can go forward. We're human beings, and we have the ability to do it. We just have to sit back and learn how to do it. And we try in our teachings to give everybody that opportunity. We are what we call spiritual healers. And by that we mean spiritual healers, the healers of our body and our mind and our soul. So that you have the ability. We don't want followers. Everybody that goes through our studies becomes a leader, in control of their own life, to be able to experience the way they feel, what they want, to be able to go out in life and truly make themselves a human being. We raise the level from a human. Think of the pentagram. It's a 5-pointed star. We are the pentagram. We are designed in the pentagram. All through nature you'll see pentagrams. If you cut an apple in half, it's a pentagram, and so forth. But when you go through the studies, you then become what we call the hexagram. If you think of a hexagram, or you've seen the Star of Solomon, many of you. Well, the hexagram is the Star of Solomon. It's two objects coming together and forming a balanced star. So the pentagram is not balanced. You're not a balanced. You got to learn to balance yourself. You've got to learn to be the hexagram, which is perfected man or consecrated. So you learn this. You don't need somebody telling you how to do it or have to do it. You have to learn how to do it. And the only way you do it is by yourself, with help, and this is what we try to do, is give you the materials or the lessons, the studies, so that you can create this within yourself. Like I say, we're not looking for followers. We're looking for leaders. What a difference that is. Most people want followers. We don't. If somebody comes to us and they want to be a follower, I tell them to go someplace else. Anyway, does that answer? Yes. Good.
Right. Thank you, Chick. Thank you, brethren.
Am
And
I
again,
done?
that's it.
Or
for
does
today.
anybody else have anything to say? Well, anyway, thank you.
Thank you, brethren. Have a safe trip.